you know, where you are sitting right now, when I was in school, I had no idea what I was going to do next. There was no such thing as a special events major at Syracuse University. Or, quite honestly, we're hiring folks all the time now with special events majors. That just didn't exist. Now, I joined a fraternity early on when I got to Syracuse and had a fantastic time. I may not have exactly gone to school to get straight A's. My intention was to have a good time. I did have a good time, but isn't it kind of clever that I had such a good time, I was able to turn it into a business. Let me tell you a little bit about my business. I think it's sort of important for you to understand that. And I'm going to actually draw you into some of our work as we do that. Although I often say, if you can't hear it from me, you can't see it from me. And that's something that I really push on my teams all the time. I want them to walk in the room. I want them to tell me all about it. And then we can look at these beautiful images of these parties that we create. As we stand today, we design, concept, and execute events. We are a one-stop shop. People come to us, and we set out a plan and tell you exactly what you need to do after we try to figure out what you really want to do. That's our product. And I know you probably studied lots of different products. There are decorators out there. There are planners out there. There's what Peak does. I mean, there's so many exciting options in this hospitality space for sure. But our lane is really to design, execute, concept, and execute. Why is that? I love control. Simple. I really do. I'm half joking. When I went to school, when I was at Syracuse, I was a political science major. And I'm not really sure why. It was just because I liked history, and I'm like, all right, I'll do that. Now, I was headed to law school. My father's a lawyer, my mother's a lawyer, my sister's a lawyer, my husband's a lawyer, my best friend's a lawyer. I mean, I'm surrounded by lawyers, which is lovely. I don't know if there's any lawyers in the room. I really do love them. But I didn't really want to be a lawyer. I wanted to go to art school. So what happened in between, I ended up going to Syracuse, diving into one opportunity after the other, including my fraternity. So imagine, I say this to my staff all the time when we have a short timeline to plan a party. This party right here is the ring ceremony for the Kansas City Chiefs. Any fans for the Chiefs? No? Okay. Does anyone know Taylor Swift? Because I really want to get her wedding. So that's another story. The Kansas City Chiefs went through an RFP process for their ring ceremony. We got thrown into the ring to see if we were up to snuff. Out of 24 companies, we got narrowed down to 2, and alas, we got the ring ceremony. Crazy, right? So I don't want to get trapped in that right now. So I guess my point is that from where you sit right now to where you're going, I imagine a lot of different things are going to happen. And so I'm excited for you for that. My company has become this incubator of creating what I think are, or what I hear from Nicole and other folks that are spectacular, esteemed, I think you used that word. But at the end of the day, we just really want to do the best work we can possibly do in that category. That's what we want to do at Rafanelli. And that's what we really fight for every single day. Now, you might be a little curious about how do we exactly do that. I don't think the secret sauce is a real mystery if you go into every category of what we do. And so I guess when I started to talk about intention, I think that's part of this story, right? What is your intention? What do you set out to do? I often during Q&A will hear people say to me, did you imagine you were going to do Naomi Biden's wedding at the White House? Did you imagine that you were going to do, at the end of this calendar year, 10 state visits at the White House? I've done over 25 events for the White House. I will tell you, absolutely not. Did I imagine I was going to have a successful life? Absolutely I was. I was determined. That was something I wanted more than anything, is to have a great life. So it was ultimately, how was I going to figure it out? I ended up figuring it out by deciding that I would do what I really loved, which in the end is organizing, is concepting, is coming up with strategies, but also design. And could the two match? My dad would say to me, Bryan, you can go become a lawyer and you can do your art on the weekends. Constantly would do that. Now again, I love my dad, but for years and years and years as I went into this business, he would introduce me to his buddies at the golf club and he'd say, oh, this is my son Bryan, the caterer. And I'd be like, no, Dad, I'm not a caterer. And it took him a very long time to truly understand what we were doing here. So what are we doing here? And when you think about your life ahead, I want you to think about all of the categories that you could dive into. We are, at the end of the day, weathermen, right? I can tell you a lot of stories about weather. We are firefighters, we're diplomats, we're designers, we're graphic designers. We are definitely caretakers. Sometimes we're life coaches. I often say when we do a wedding, it's like the boot camp for life, and looking at it from the day you start with us to the day after you get married. It's kind of brutal figuring out how to do that and how to spend your father's money. I'm looking at you. I hope you have a daughter. So, do you?
Spend a lot of money on her next year.
Fantastic. Does that mean she's getting married? Going to school? All right, good for you. So let me jump in very quickly to a couple case studies. So this is the South Lawn of the White House. This is the state dinner for Australia. And if you don't know what a state dinner is, it's really the highest honor that the United States can bestow on a head of state and a country. So ultimately is to bring you here and say, we love you. We want to do business with you. We want to raise you up. And so we have had the good fortune of producing a lot of these, but the flip side of that is the language that we need to tell. So is there some truth in design and diplomacy? Does design and this party matter to the country that is coming over? It absolutely does. I wanted to share this story with you because this state dinner happened 6 days before the Middle East crisis. And so we were planning, look at this party, we were planning this 600-person seated dinner. What you're looking at is imagery that is a reflection or a narrative of the painted landscapes of both the United States and Australia. Well, what does that mean? It means that every story that we create for all of our clients is a narrative, and then we push that narrative forward. So you're nodding, I like that. So that's what this represents to us, but also to the country, of this idea that we are feeding them and raising them up, and we're showing appreciation and how much we care. The reason I brought up the fact that this happened right before the Middle East crisis is, can you imagine planning an event like this, a very over-the-top, celebratory, black tie celebration, and what was happening in the world? So suddenly, this event represented something different. The B-52s were actually supposed to perform, and the White House brought it down because they didn't feel like it was appropriate, which I think was, that's my mother, no, I'm kidding. It's always bugging me. This was, the intention was, do we bring this down? Well, in fact, what happened was all of this was happening in the world, and the celebration brought it up. It raised it up. It raised up this idea of, we have this strong relationship. It means something in this moment on this night. We were part of that. And that meant an awful lot to me. And when the provost was sort of talking about impact, going out in the world and doing good things, I can assure you that that is happening even in my world. This next photo is, I get married 10 times a year. We do over 100 events a year, by the way. Our category of business in the private category is where weddings land. This is a wedding that we just recently did. When I sent this is actually a rendering. And this video is showing you the reality. So I'm excited to talk to Padma this afternoon because I'm going to pitch this show to her. So it's going to be rendering to reality. So we, as I mentioned 10 times a year, produce these kinds of events for clearly extraordinary people. But that aside, when I sent this photo around to my family, as I do when I'm on site, they all sent back and said, well, who's the Disney princess, or is that Narnia? Trying to understand what this really was. But these are the visions of both my team and my client's team. And that's where we dive into telling a story and creating a true experience. In my world, and the people that we serve, which is generally highly, highly successful people that want to have extraordinary celebrations, it is critical to me that they, the day after, and I want you to imagine this, the day after the celebration, what are they talking about and what do they connect to? Are they connecting to celebration, to family, to meaning? That's what we really, really struggle in a good way to create for them. So as beautiful and as extraordinary as this is, with our over 300 suppliers that were in that room to create that, it was really, that's what we were looking for. I mean, I certainly believe in great celebrations, clearly. I ended up in this lane completely by accident. So I also wanted to toss that out, that if that is, my intention wasn't necessarily to say, can I work for the wealthiest people in the world doing the most extraordinary events in the world? I didn't exactly say that, but what I did say to myself is I did want to do great work, and I wanted to do extraordinary work. And so how could I find a pathway to that? I ended up getting in this business through nonprofit. So a friend of mine passed away of AIDS in the mid-'80s, and I went to an organization and started volunteering. I volunteered on their special events committee. I started doing events for them as a volunteer. In 3 years, I did over a dozen events for them. Their executive director came to me and said, Bryan, we need to pay you to do this. We can't let you volunteer anymore. And so began my life in the event business. I used to do 3 events a year. The fee that I charged the first time was $3,000. I now do 100 events a year. The last fee that we put forward was $500,000. The world changed a little bit from then to now, but how it changed was that people recognized our work. And when they recognized our work doing in the nonprofit space, they asked us to do work in the private space. And I remember when the client came to me and said, we'd like you to do our daughter's wedding, I'm like, I am not a wedding planner. I do nonprofit work. They're like, oh no, you're a wedding planner. Okay, pro tip. Your best customer is sitting in the room. That happens. These aren't just stories. And I actually think that on this side of my business, I seek those stories out. So literally, I walk into a party with 300 people. I have a piece of paper in my pocket which identifies 12 tables in the room of the people either who have gone to a Rafanelli event before, talked to us before, or I want them as a customer. And so I directly, in some way, shape, or form, talk to them, introduce myself, make sure they know who we are to move the ball forward. The other story I told you about, that couple coming up and saying, I want you to do my daughter's wedding, was total circumstance. Why did I have room for total circumstance? Because we planned the event to the last moment so that we had the time to actually take advantage of an opportunity that could present itself at any moment. And I totally believe in circumstance, and I totally believe in purpose. So when you bring those two together, you end up with something, right? Something could happen. For me, it was actually this couple introducing me. That same couple raised money for the Clinton family. So if you follow the bouncing ball and heard that I did Chelsea Clinton's wedding, sort of joke about this all the time, that it's going to be on my headstone. But now I have to make room for Naomi Biden and a few other people. But that they introduced me through events to the Clinton family when Chelsea got engaged. I called them and said, would you introduce me to the Clintons? They said, they've already called us. They want to call you. So then the Clintons introduced me to the Obamas, who introduced me to the Bidens. So everything actually rolled forward. Now, is this all because I'm a good guy? That's part of it, I hope. But it's really because we put our talent first. We really earned our stripes. We worked really hard to earn our stripes so that our name kept on coming up and coming up and coming up and coming up. I think strategically, at the end of the day, jumping back to our nonprofit work, is that we offer a product in our nonprofit that is thoughtful, that we create a narrative. We actually teach our clients how to raise money. We don't just want to produce a beautiful event. I won't have it. Like, I won't have an artistic event. I can have that here, right? I want to have that when, for a group and an organization that raises millions of dollars, I want to turn around and create an experience that feels like that, and that then they raise more money. So on this side of my career, that's happening all the time. Nothing makes me prouder. I was just in Houston with UNICEF, and we're doing a 7-city tour with UNICEF. We're taking one event, same event, we're moving it to 7 cities. A huge value proposition for the client, but at the same time, the money that's being raised because of the time and energy we're putting into these projects is inspiring them. It's creating a connection for them. And this isn't, and I know Bazaar is probably going to talk a lot about hotels and that sort of high touch, but it's very similar of like how you make people feel. What's the experience? What do they remember? Do they feel value? A nonprofit, if I came in and bought a $100,000 table for 10 of my family and they came to an event, I feel an obligation to make sure they feel like they had the best night of their life. Why? Not because I want them to talk about Rafanelli, but because I want them to talk about UNICEF. I want them to say we're in the right place, in the right time, and we feel so empowered for what we did here. So that's why I brought Nicole up on the stage, so she'd feel really good about her investment. I'm kidding, Nicole. The other two things I actually, because I really want to go to Q&A, I want to tell you that the intention is always good. Intuition, if you have it, lean into it as hard as you possibly can, because that's really critical. And then intel is the third thing. So intention, initiative, or intuition rather, and intel. If you marry those three things together, then there isn't any circumstance, right? And I told you I believe in circumstance, but I want to set it up every single time. I want to set it up so it can happen, that the opportunity could present itself. That's, to me, is the magic of my company. If we go and just quickly drill into saying, what is it at the end of the day? It's this perfect combination of all these things that we touch. I was looking for hands in the room to ask folks if they had jobs, because in the olden days, just 5 years ago, if you asked me to hire an entry level out of college, I would never do it. I would never do it. I was like, no way, I'm not going to teach them how to wake up in the morning. I'm not going to teach how to keep the kitchen clean. Well, those days are over. Number one, my entire company is virtual, by the way. Only 5 years ago, we had these spectacular offices in Boston and New York. That's all gone. I have a spectacular office in every one of my homes, and all of my team get to work from home, and they can be with their children. It's like this incredible thing. But in the event business, in my world, what do we do? When we go to the White House, we're going to be on the White House lawn for 10 days. We're going to have 20 of our team members there out of 67 employees. They get to get an Airbnb, hang out, have team dinners, get to know each other. So the possibilities of what's happening in our world and how we work in our world are changing so dramatically. And interestingly enough, I was talking to a Bain Capital guy the other night, and he goes, that goes against everything that we believe in. And I'm like, I'm telling you it can work. And it does work at Rafanelli.